Very good morning, students. Welcome to IIT NEET Foundation or Focus C program by Krishnaveni Talent Schools and the Mastermind Schools. So once again, I welcome all the class 8th students for today's session. As you can see on the screen, and you are well aware, my subject is physics. We are in class 8th, our ongoing 5th chapter, friction. Today we are entering into the session number 3. So far we completed 2 sessions to know about the frictional force. So we'll continue where we left in the last class. But before that, let us recall what we learned about the friction till date, right? So just when you recall last 2 sessions, so what we learn is mainly about we learn about first what is a friction, right? And second one is factors influencing friction or factors affecting friction. And third, we know more in the last class about the types of frictions, where you come across static friction and kinetic friction and rolling friction. We have seen the various examples for this. And when static friction reaches to the peak level, it is called static friction. Kinetic also called as the dynamic friction. So like these are the static friction is always greater than the kinetic, always greater than the rolling. Means friction is more when the body is at rest. Once you reach the peak level of the static friction, when body starts move or roll, then automatically the frictional force decreases, right? So such a wonderful nature's force, we cannot see the frictional force, only we can experience, right? It's a nature's force which is very important for our day-to-day journey. I already told you, to hold any object, also the frictional force is important. To walk on the floor, the frictional force is important. While you are running the vehicle, frictional force comes into play, right? So everywhere in our day-to-day walk, we can find the frictional force, and we can find the both importance and the evil effects of frictional force. It is good as well as bad. Some cases is very bad, like for example, when you are running the cycle continuously, what happens? We'll get a sound from the wheels. Why? Because of the continuous rubbing of that ball bearings. So what we have to do? You have to put some oil or grease to make it very smooth. Or it produces the heat sometimes in 4-wheelers. So because of rubbing of 2 parts of the vehicle, the heat is produced. So to reduce it again, you have to use some lubricant. So such ways, even industries also, the machinery is damaged from time to time. The wear and tear is time to time because of the friction, but it is compulsory, right? Such a wonderful force which comes into nature is called friction, right? Now we'll continue where we left. Last class we have seen about the different types of frictions. What is the static, dynamic friction, dynamic or sliding friction, or rolling. Rolling also, we can roll. Rolling friction is less, frictional force is less and all. Then we'll see so how to reduce the friction, and before that, what is the friction is cause of motion. When a body is in motion, the frictional force comes to play. So it is generally misconception that friction always opposes the motion. No doubt, friction opposes the motion of the moving body, but in many cases, it is also the cause of motion. Right? So friction force always acts in the direction opposite to the motion. But it also important that it makes the motion to be done, or it cause of the motion. You can see so many examples are given. Number one, while moving, a person or a vehicle pushes the ground backward, action, that is called action, and the rough surface of the ground reacts and exert forward force due to friction, which causes the motion. If there had been no friction, there would be slipping and no motion. When you are walking on the floor, what will do? We'll apply force on the floor and we'll move the force backside so that we'll move forward. Action, reaction. When you are pulling the backside, you can move the forward direction. Suppose imagine there is no frictional force. We cannot move forward. We cannot put one step also. We'll fall down. For every step, we'll fall down. Such a wonderful nature's force is friction. See, one more example is given here, beautiful. During cycling, most of you will do. The rear means back wheel, moves by force communicated to it by pedaling, while the front wheel moves by itself. So whatever, see, observe carefully, the front wheel is not connected with any chain. Only back wheel is connected with the chain. So when you are pedaling, only back wheel will move the first itself, but front wheel will move automatically. So when pedaling a cycle, the force exerted by the rear wheel, rear means back, remember, on the ground makes the force of friction acts on it in forward direction like walking. Same. The rear wheel exert the pressure on the floor in backward direction. Then it makes the frictional force makes the cycle to move in the forward direction. The front wheel moving by itself experiences the force of friction in the backward direction like rolling a ball. However, if pedaling stopped, both wheels move by themselves and so experience force of friction in the backward direction. Right. One more example is this. If a body is placed in a vehicle, that is accelerating, the force of friction is cause of motion of the body along with the vehicle. So along with the vehicle, any body, suppose any suitcase or any bag, the body will remain at the rest in the accelerating wheel until the force is less than the frictional force. So this is force. Ma is the force. Mu mg is the frictional force. When frictional force is more than ordinary force, the body will fall down. If there had been no friction between the body and vehicle, the body will not move along with the vehicle. From these examples, it is clear that without friction, motion cannot be started, stopped, or transferred from one body to another body. See how important friction for the motion of the body. So, body cannot move or cannot stop or cannot transfer from one place to another place if there is no friction. So that much importance is there for the friction in our day-to-day life. So it is a purely a nature's force. Nobody is applying. There is no external agent. Suppose if you have muscular force, so we'll apply the force. That is called muscular force. But frictional force, there is no agent. Only nature is the agent. God is the agent. So nature creates this force which can be useful for us. Of course, there are some disadvantages are there and most advantages are there that we'll discuss in the next lessons, next part. Right? Now, the next one is method of reducing friction. So how to reduce the friction? So why to reduce? Already I told. Because of friction, heat is produced in various mechanical devices or automobiles or any machines. right? So when heat increases, what happened? The machine may damage. There is a wear and tear in the machine. A simple example you gave cycle only. When you continuously are using the cycle, a rainy season, winter, summer, so after some days, what happened? We are able to hear some sound. Even two-wheelers also. So that's why we'll give frequently for the servicing. For cycles, what we'll do? We'll only do the washing and we'll go for the oiling. We'll put some oil into that, or we'll put some grease. They are called lubricants. So we can reduce the friction first by polishing the surface, or lubrication. Lubrication is then by applying the oil or grease and all. By proper selection of materials, by streamlining the shape of the body. Very important this is. Streamlining means designing a separate. For example, aeroplane is there. Why aeroplane is in that particular shape? Even though that much heavy aeroplane, how it can able to fly in the air? That is because that streamline. The shape is it clearly responsible for the overcoming the frictional force. Whenever that aeroplane can overcome the frictional force of the wind, it can move forward. That is a wonder. That is a wonder of nature. Otherwise, you cannot imagine that heavy aeroplane, how it is flying in the air. Right? So that is also one of the important part of the friction. That is by streamlining the shape of the body. So how come the bird flying in the air? Because body is designed in such a manner by the God so that it can move by overcoming the frictional force. Right? By using ball bearings. Right? We can see in cycle, back wheel for which it is connected with a chain, we can see the ball bearings. So the ball bearings makes the cycle to move smoothly and easily. Even in the various mechanical machines, automobiles also, the ball bearings plays very important role in making the frictional force to reduce. Once frictional force is reduced, body will move smoothly, right? So these are the few important methods of reducing the friction. So like that, why you have to reduce the friction? To make the smooth motion, make the comfortable motion, right? So this is about the methods of reducing friction. Even you can increase the friction also. Some cases we need to increase the friction. That we'll see later. But before going for the further, let me show you one video on the same methods of friction, reducing friction, increasing or reducing. Okay.
We know that at certain situations friction is useful. In certain situations friction is not useful, not desirable. So depending upon the situation, if we want, we can find out ways to increase friction or to reduce friction. So here in this section, we are going to talk about increasing and reducing friction. So let us first focus on increasing friction. So what do you think? In which situation will we want to increase the friction? Where friction is desirable, of course. So friction can be increased deliberately in situations where it is necessary. Wherever it is important, wherever it is good, wherever it is desirable, we will try to increase friction. Now, how can we increase friction? Friction is because of the nature of surface, right? By now we know the causes. So if the surfaces are pressed hard, friction will increase. If the surface is rough, friction will increase. So one very common way to increase friction is to make the surface rough. So if you have a smooth surface, you want to increase the friction, just make the surface rough by pouring something which is very rough in nature. For example, the treaded tires. So if you look at the structure of the tires very closely, you will actually see that the surface of the tires here. So the surface of the tires here have some designs or patterns like this, and they make the surface of the tire really uneven or rough. And this rough surface of the tire helps it to move well on the road, because when it moves on the road, since this is also rough, so the chances of slipping is less. Therefore, the vehicle can move in a better way with treaded tires. Not only tires, you can look at your shoe soles. It is not shoe, but your shoe soles. So just the bottom of your shoe. If you see, there are some patterns or designs made over it, and it is made in such a way that the surface is not smooth. So it is made rough so that it can have a better grip on the ground. So this is also another way of increasing friction. Spreading sand on slippery surface. Let us suppose if oil has been spilled over a surface in your house, what happens? You tend to slip over it. Why? Because the surface has become slippery. The friction has reduced. So now if you want to increase the friction, what do you do? First of all, you remove the oil. Just try it out. You just spread some sand over the surface. Now sand they are like particles, coarse particles. So when you spread sand over the surface, it makes the surface completely rough. That is why you would have observed that in the desert area, like if you go near a sea beach, so it is very difficult to walk on sand because sand provides a lot of friction. The friction there is too high, which makes it even difficult to walk. So the friction also has to be in the appropriate amount. If there is no friction, we will not be able to walk. Even if there is too much of friction, that also makes us difficult to walk. In fact, when you look at the performances by the gymnastic people, so they would often need to hold objects and then hang over it, or hold somebody else's hands or legs. So they often they often apply some rough material on their hands so that their friction on their hand increases, so that they get a better grip when they hold something, whether they hold a wire or a rope or somebody else.
See, when you see in the Olympics also, any games, weightlifters or javelin throw, discus throw, they'll apply some powder to their hands to avoid the skidding. Even in the cricket also, when you see during the wet night time, when they're playing the night games, you can see the moisture, water droplets will stick to the ball. So they keep on treating the ball with a napkin because to increase the friction, right?
Hands or legs, so they'll get a better grip. So these are some of the places where we see that we try to increase friction by making the surface rough. Now comes the turn for reducing friction. Those places where friction is undesirable, we do not want friction to be there, then in those places we try to reduce friction. So one such place would be obviously the machines, because as I told you that due to friction a lot of energy gets wasted in the form of heat in machines. So we will always like to reduce friction in machinery parts. And how do we do that? Let us have a look. Applying grease in machinery parts. So if you apply grease, the surfaces will turn to be smooth and therefore friction will reduce. That is one way. In fact, you would have seen this application. If you want, you can try it out at your home also. Sometimes the doors or the window panes, they start making a lot of noise. Why do you get that noise? Because of friction. Because when you close the door or when you open the door, they tend to make the noise because of friction, because the surfaces are moving over one another. Mostly these areas, because they are the joints. So if you apply grease or oil, some oily substance to make the surface smooth in these areas, you will see that the sound disappears. That's because the noise doesn't come out anymore, because the friction has been reduced by the application of oil or grease. Applying powder on carom boards. I'm sure all of you would have played carom board sometime or the other. So when you apply powder on the carom board, what happens is the board becomes slippery. So it becomes easier to strike to strike various coins. So the movement is smoother and quicker on the board. Lubrication. What is lubrication? Now, applying oil or grease or any such oily material on a substance to make it slippery and smooth, this process is called lubrication. Streamlining to reduce friction. Now, what is streamlining? This is something which we are going to discuss separately in a different slide, but just to give you an intro. So you would have seen that there are various objects which have a specific shape. For example, if you look at the aeroplane, so aeroplane have got a very specific shape, a very unique and a very different shape, and which helps them to fly in air. Right? So this specific designing of objects so that they are able to reduce the friction is known as streamlining, and the way aeroplanes are designed so that they can reduce air friction because they are traveling through air. Similarly, the way cars are designed, because they are also traveling on land, but they also need to overcome the air friction. So all those things are considered. Their shapes are being designed in considering the fact that they should be able to reduce air friction, and therefore they should be able to move forward smoothly. So streamlining is another way, that is
Very
designing the
important.
shape of an object in such a way so that it can reduce the friction.
That is ball
Ball
bearing.
bearing. What is ball bearing? So I think we will take it up in the next slide so that you are able to understand it better. So ball bearing is nothing but several balls kept inside, like
Balls
let us
keep.
suppose inside a machine you have a part where you have one fixed plate, and inside that you have another plate, and this plate is moving. So if this plate is moving over the outside plate which is fixed, what is happening? Constantly there is friction which is being encountered between these two plates, because the outer plate is not moving, inner plate is constantly moving on the surface of the outer plate. So what do? You just make sure that these two plates are not in touch, and in between the empty spaces you put some balls. And what happens as this plate moves, now these balls keep moving over one another, but the friction between this and this gets avoided. So that ways friction can be reduced. The effects or the adverse effects of friction can be reduced. Now we will spend some time trying to understand streamlining and ball.
Right. So the wonderful video about this one. Right. So we have seen clearly what are the methods of even increasing the friction as well as to reduce the friction. Means both are very important. Some cases we need to increase the friction, where we'll add some sand, or some more methods are given to increase the friction. Whereas reducing the friction also important where there is a more friction is there. So further there are so many methods are given, right? Then when you see the next part here, one conclusion of that friction, also we can increase the friction by throwing the some sand on slippery ground. In the manufacturers of tires, synthetic rubber is preferred because its coefficient of friction with the road is larger. Means will give a threading to the wheels. Why wheels are having threading? To hold the floor, hold the road, to increase the friction. When friction increases, it can stick to the road and it won't slip. So there are the methods for increasing. So increasing and reducing are covered here, right? Very important in our day-to-day life, whether to increase the friction, wherever required, we can reduce, wherever required, we can increase the friction to make the body to move, or make the body to stop, or make the body to transfer energy. For everything it is possible, right? Oiling, greasing, which is together called as lubrication. It is a compulsory when every vehicles also will keep changing the oil for every some kilometers. Why? Because of the friction, right? Then some important term that is about angle of friction. When a body is in contact with the surface, the angle made by the resultant normal reaction and limiting friction with normal reaction is called angle of friction. The angle made by normal. Normal is nothing but perpendicular to the surfaces in contact, right? And reaction and the limiting friction. What is limiting friction? Peak level of the static friction. Whenever we are applying the force on a body, it is at rest only. But whenever the applied force is more than the frictional force, the body starts moving, about to start. That friction is called limiting friction. We can measure by using our spring balance with the various methods, right? So let us consider a rectangular block of mass A. So this is a rectangular block of mass m on rough horizontal surface under the condition of limiting equilibrium. Means it is ready to start. Normal force is balanced by the weight. See, these are the contact surface of both surfaces. So normal force is the perpendicular one and it is balanced by weight. That is the reason the block remains there only. The weight of the body acts in downward direction normal force exerted by the second surface on first surface. That is rough surface on block of the wood is, that is, we can say N is equal to mg. Then we know the formula F is equal to, that is limiting friction. We have seen the limiting friction is directly proportional to coefficient of static friction. So we got the formula F is equal to mu mg. In place of N, we wrote mg. Right? Mu s. From the diagram, tan theta. If you take tan theta from here, what is tan theta? Opposite side by adjacent side. Okay, of the angle. See the angle? Where is the opposite side of the angle by adjacent side? That is Fl by N. This is the adjacent side. This is the opposite side. Right. So see, this is the angle. Opposite side by adjacent side. So we got tan theta is equal to Fl by N. What is N here? So in place of Fl, we can substitute this value, this one, mu mg. Mg cancel is equal to mu s. Tan theta is equal to mu s, or mu s is equal to static friction is given by tan theta. The greater the angle of friction, the greater the value of coefficient of friction. Means the friction increases when the angle increases. Greater the tan angle, automatically it depends on the value of theta, where the tan value increases. Okay. Right? So this is called angle of friction, which is theta is equal to tan inverse mu s, also you can write. The angle made by the normal reaction with limiting friction. Angle made by the normal force with limiting friction. What is limiting friction? The peak friction force of the static friction. When a body is about to move, that peak value of static friction is called limiting friction. That is mu s, coefficient of limiting friction. Okay. So this is about the angle of the friction, which is very, very, very important. Right. So today we learn about mainly about what is the methods of reducing friction. Before that, we have seen that friction is the cause of motion. Right? Friction is cause of motion. Various examples as you have seen. For every moving body, whether you are walking or cycling or we are traveling by the four-wheeler or two-wheeler, three-wheeler, everywhere the responsible for the motion of the body is friction only. Then we have seen what are the different methods of reducing friction as well as increasing friction and angle of friction. Angle of friction is very important for the greater the angle of friction, the greater the coefficient of friction value. So coefficient of friction is more, means the body is having the easy motion. So these are the points we discussed today. So remaining will continue in the next class about the some more mathematical derivations like motion of the body on rough surface, right? Motion of the body on smooth surface. See, friction between the two vertical surfaces. So not only horizontal or inclined, even vertical surface also the force will act, right? So then pulling is easier than the pushing. Why? We can see mathematically also. So pushing force at an angle of theta. So angle of repose, very important derivation. This is we come across in higher classes, very important part to solve the. So with this, we can conclude the friction chapter in the next, when we meet on Friday. So that we can left with the only one chapter, the last chapter, magnetism. But before that, we have to complete these 3-4 topics in the friction chapter, right? So clearly we clear about what we have done in the friction till now, right? So friction is a very important nature's force. So we learn about what is friction first. Once again, we recall all the 3 days. Then factors influence friction, very important. So factors means which nature of the body is in contact, which nature they are. and area of contact. I've seen so many examples. Why camel walks on the sand, desert than the horse or donkey, and how easily skate on the ice with the skiers. All so many examples we have seen. Then types of frictions. Then the friction is the cause of motion. Very important. Then how to reduce the friction and how to increase the friction. Right? How to increase the friction. Then lastly, angle of friction. Right? So tan theta is equal to mu s, static friction. That is theta is equal to, you can write, by this you can calculate the angle of friction. Coefficient of, you can calculate coefficient of friction as well as angle of friction. If angle of friction is given, you can calculate mu s. If mu s is given, you can calculate the angle of friction. Both are direct. If this increases, that also increases. Right. In this also we discussed about what is the normal force and how normal force is directly proportional to static friction. And from that only we derived the coefficient of friction. That is n is equal to mu s fs. Some formula. From that only you got mu s is equal to n by fs. Just now we have derived. N is nothing but mg here. From that we got the theta value. So like that we discussed about the coefficient of static friction, coefficient of rolling friction, coefficient of kinetic friction. So coefficient of static friction is more than the kinetic friction, more than the rolling friction, because the friction reduces when one's body starts moving, either sliding or rolling. So these are total topics of the friction what we discussed so far. Little more, one or two topics are there which we are going to complete in the next class, right? So till then, thank you all of you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.